The twin suns of Atheros glowed softly over the grand palace of crystal and silver. The alien city stretched far beyond the horizon, a mix of gleaming towers and floating gardens suspended by light itself. It was a world known for peace, wisdom, and elegance, and tonight it was preparing for something that would change the course of its history forever. The royal court buzzed with quiet tension. Servants hurried through corridors with long flowing robes, and golden banners fluttered in the soft violet wind. At the center of it all stood Princess Alara, staring out from her balcony, her heart pounding like a storm trapped inside her chest. She had known this day would come, but she had prayed it would not. Her father, the High King of Atheros, had arranged a political marriage, not with another noble from their system, not even with one of the peaceful galactic races, but with a human. A warrior, a man whose name alone could make the bravest soldiers hesitate. Commander Ryland Drake. Alara's eyes filled with confusion and fear. She had read about humans in her lessons. They were powerful, bold, and unpredictable. Their world, Earth, was called a death world, a place of constant challenge and danger. Humanity had risen through struggle, not peace. They were known as survivors, conquerors, and in many eyes, destroyers. And now one of them was to become her husband. She turned as the royal doors opened. Her father entered, his tall frame cloaked in silver robes that shimmered like moonlight. The king was a wise ruler but burdened by endless wars. He looked at his daughter with both love and sorrow. "Alara," he said gently, "the envoy from Earth arrives within the hour. You must prepare to greet him." Her voice trembled as she replied, "Father, please not him. Anyone but him. They say he's ruthless, that he commands without mercy." The king sighed deeply. "I have heard those stories too. But I have also seen the truth. He is not here to harm you, Alara. He is here because peace demands it. The humans are the only force strong enough to stop the Krell Dominion. You know what they have done to our border worlds?" Alara clenched her hands, her silver rings catching the fading light. "So I am to be a bridge between worlds?" she whispered. "You are to be hope," her father said. "And hope often demands courage." She said nothing more. Her father touched her shoulder softly and left the room, leaving her alone with her fears. The soft hum of alien music echoed faintly through the palace corridors, but her thoughts were far from peace. She imagined this human, his cold eyes, his mechanical armor, the stories of him standing alone on the battlefield surrounded by enemies, surviving when no one else did. They called him the Iron Wolf. To her, the name alone sounded cruel. When the human delegation arrived, the palace gates opened with a sound like thunder. Hundreds of alien nobles gathered along the grand hall, whispering and craning their necks to catch a glimpse of the humans. They were taller than expected, dressed not in elegant robes but in sleek gray uniforms marked with scars of battle. And there he was, Ryland Drake. He moved with silent discipline, his dark armor reflecting the pale light of Atheros. His eyes were sharp, steady, and unreadable. There was no smile on his face, no sign of arrogance, only calm strength. He bowed slightly before the king, but his gaze never lingered on Alara. She noticed that even when he looked in her direction, it wasn't with cruelty. It was as if he was studying her, assessing her the way a soldier examines a new terrain. The court musicians stopped playing and silence filled the air. The king spoke first, his voice firm but tired. "Commander Drake, the people of Atheros welcome the people of Earth. May this union bring an end to the bloodshed." Ryland's voice was deep, steady, almost emotionless. "Your Majesty, the humans share that hope." He turned slightly, finally meeting Alara's eyes. "Princess." It was one word, spoken without warmth but not unkind. It was more of an acknowledgement, like a soldier saluting another soldier. Alara bowed her head slightly, but her heart was racing. She could feel every gaze in the hall upon her. The ceremony of alliance continued through the evening. There was a grand feast with alien delicacies and human wines, yet Alara barely touched her plate. She kept glancing at Ryland, who sat across from her, surrounded by his officers. He spoke little, his expression never changing. Every motion of his seemed measured, controlled. When the royal advisor made a toast praising the courage of humans, some alien nobles whispered among themselves, not kindly. One voice, low but sharp, carried across the hall. "Courage or brutality? I hear they burn worlds when they cannot win." Ryland looked up slowly. The entire table fell silent. His eyes met the noble's, and for a heartbeat the air felt heavy. Then Rylan simply said, "You've heard wrong." His tone was even but powerful. The noble looked away in shame. Ilara found herself strangely moved, not by fear but by respect. After the feast, she slipped away into the garden, needing to breathe. The alien night was beautiful. Glowing leaves, silver rivers, and small creatures floating like stars. Yet she felt trapped, caught in a destiny she hadn't chosen. She sat by the fountain, staring into the water. She didn't notice Rylan approach until his shadow fell across her. "You shouldn't be alone out here," he said quietly. She looked up, startled. "Are you giving me orders already?" she asked, her tone sharper than she intended. He didn't smile. "I'm giving advice. Your world is at war, and there are still those who would see this alliance fail." "You mean assassins?" she asked. He nodded. "Among other things." Ilara hesitated, then asked the question that had been haunting her. "Why did you agree to this? Surely you don't want to marry a stranger from another world." For the first time, his eyes softened. "Because peace doesn't happen by wishing for it. It takes sacrifice. I've fought enough wars to know when it's time to stop fighting." His words hung in the air like quiet thunder. Ilara didn't know what to say. She had expected arrogance or indifference, but instead she found honesty. "You think I'm ruthless," he continued, "but I only fight when I must. I don't enjoy it." "I never did." Ilara watched him carefully. The stories she had heard painted him as a monster, a man without feeling. But in his voice she heard weariness, the kind that comes from too many battles, too many losses. "I don't know if I can trust you," she said softly. "You shouldn't," he replied calmly. "Not yet." That answer caught her off guard. He didn't try to convince her otherwise. He simply turned and began to walk back toward the palace. Before disappearing into the corridor, he added, "But I'll never let harm come to you. That much you can trust." Ilara sat there long after he left, listening to the quiet hum of alien insects in the night air. She touched the small pendant at her neck, a symbol of her royal house, and felt its faint warmth. Maybe, she thought, the human wasn't as heartless as she feared. Maybe there was more to him, something hidden beneath the iron mask of his duty. When she returned to her chambers, she found a folded message on her desk. It bore the human seal, a simple insignia of a hand gripping a torch. Inside was a short note written in precise handwriting. "I understand your fear. I will not ask for your heart, only your trust when the time comes." She read it twice, then pressed it close to her chest, unsure why her eyes were stinging. The human was strange, distant and unreadable, but somehow his words reached her in a way no one else's could. As she drifted to sleep, the twin moons of Atheris shone softly through her window. Far below, in the human quarters of the palace, Rylan stood alone on a balcony looking up at the same moons. His hand rested on the small locket he kept hidden under his armor. Inside it, a faded picture of his lost comrades. He whispered quietly to the stars, "No more wars." Neither of them knew it yet, but that night marked the beginning of something far greater than an alliance. A fragile bond that would test every belief they had about love, trust, and the meaning of peace. The next morning on Atheris began with the soft sound of bells echoing across the silver skies. The palace shimmered in the sunlight, and the air was filled with a calm hum of preparation. It was the day of the first formal meeting between the human and alien delegations, a ceremony meant to show unity between two species that had once stood on opposite sides of countless battlefields. Princess Ilara stood before her mirror, her reflection pale and uncertain. The attendants moved quietly around her, arranging her silver-blue gown and fixing the crystal clasp that marked her royal lineage. But even as they worked, her thoughts were elsewhere. She couldn't stop thinking about the human commander's words from the night before. He had spoken few sentences, yet those words stayed with her like a song she couldn't forget. "I'll never let harm come to you. That much you can trust." She didn't know whether to believe him. Humans were skilled with words, she'd been told. They spoke of peace while holding a sword behind their backs. But when she remembered the tone of his voice, calm and honest, something inside her refused to see him as a liar. When she entered the main hall, she saw Rylan already there. He stood at the far end, speaking quietly with the Etherian generals and human officers. He wore a ceremonial uniform today, sleek gray trimmed with silver. No armor this time, But even without his weapons, he carried the aura of a soldier who had never stopped being ready. He looked up as Alara approached. Their eyes met briefly, and she felt her heart skip before she quickly turned her gaze away. He inclined his head respectfully but said nothing. The meeting began. The High King spoke first, welcoming the delegates and expressing hope for the alliance. Then Ryland stepped forward to speak on behalf of the humans. His voice was steady, deep, and deliberate. He talked about cooperation, trade, and joint defense against the Krell Dominion. He spoke with conviction, not arrogance. Even the most skeptical nobles listened in silence. Alara watched him closely. She noticed the faint scar that ran along his jawline, the way his eyes softened whenever he mentioned peace. For a man who had lived his life in war, he didn't speak like someone who wanted more of it. When the session ended, polite applause followed, but Ryland didn't bask in it. He simply bowed and stepped aside. Later, as the guests dispersed, Alara found herself walking toward the garden once more. The air there smelled of silver blossoms, and the crystal fountains whispered softly. To her surprise, she wasn't alone. Ryland was standing by the marble rail looking out over the alien city that floated beneath them. "You seem to like this garden," he said quietly without turning. Alara hesitated. "It's one of the few places where people don't look at me as a symbol," she replied. "Here I can be just myself," he nodded. "I know the feeling." She looked at him puzzled. "You? You're a war hero on your world. People must admire you." He let out a quiet, humorless laugh. "Admire, maybe, but they don't understand. Every medal I've earned came at the cost of someone I couldn't save. The more they cheer, the heavier it feels." Alara's expression softened. She hadn't expected such honesty. "Then why keep fighting?" she asked gently. "Because peace has a price," he said, "and someone always has to pay it. I just wanted it to be me instead of others." For a moment, silence filled the space between them, heavy and thoughtful. The soft glow of the alien sun cast long beams of light through the garden, and the leaves around them shimmered like liquid glass. Alara studied his face, the faint lines of exhaustion near his eyes, the quiet sadness behind his calm expression. He was not what she had expected. Not a brute, not a conqueror, but a man burdened by too many memories. "I judged you unfairly," she said quietly. He looked at her. "You judged what you were told to fear. That's not unfair." Their eyes met, and for the first time the silence between them didn't feel uncomfortable. It felt fragile, like a new beginning neither wanted to break. But their peace didn't last long. Later that evening, as the palace prepared for a diplomatic parade to honor the new alliance, something strange occurred. The royal guards discovered a malfunction in one of the hover platforms, set to carry the princess through the city. The engineers were baffled. It wasn't a normal failure. Someone had tampered with it. The king ordered the parade to continue with extra security, but Ryland's instincts screamed caution. He checked the formation personally, inspecting every vehicle, every control system, and every guard. Alara noticed his sharp attention to detail. He moved like a man who trusted nothing but his own eyes. When the parade began, cheers filled the air. Thousands of Etherians stood along the floating streets, waving banners of peace. Ryland walked near the royal carriage, scanning the rooftops, every shadow, every movement. Alara sat inside, smiling and waving, but she could feel his presence nearby, like a silent guardian. Then it happened. From somewhere in the crowd, a bright flash erupted. A small drone, disguised as a decorative balloon, suddenly veered toward the royal carriage. Before the guards could react, it fired a thin beam of plasma straight toward Alara. In that single instant, Ryland moved. He didn't think. He simply acted. He leapt in front of the carriage, his body turning to shield her. The beam struck his shoulder, burning through his uniform, and he stumbled but didn't fall. The guards rushed to form a shield wall, the crowd screaming in confusion. Ryland drew his sidearm and fired once, perfectly, shattering the drone before it could fire again. Alara jumped out of the carriage, ignoring protocol. She ran to him as he fell to one knee, clutching his arm. His uniform was scorched, but he was alive. "Commander!" she cried, kneeling beside him. "I'm fine," he said through gritted teeth. "Stay down." The guards surrounded them, scanning for more threats. The king's personal physician rushed forward, treating the wound with a healing mist that sealed the burn. But Alara's hands were trembling as she helped steady him. You could have died," she whispered. He looked at her, his voice calm despite the pain. "Better me than you." That simple statement broke something inside her. He wasn't ruthless. He wasn't cold. He was human in the truest sense, someone who protected others even when he didn't have to. Later, when the palace was secured and the attackers captured, the truth came out. The assassin was not human, but a Krell spy disguised among the crowd. The attack had been meant to shatter the fragile trust between Earth and Aetheris. That night, the palace was quiet. Ryland's injury wasn't fatal, but he had lost a great deal of strength. Alara went to see him in the medical wing. The room was dim, filled with soft blue lights and the steady hum of alien machines. He lay on a reclining bed, his arm wrapped in glowing bandages. When she entered, he opened his eyes and tried to sit up. "You should rest," she said softly. He smiled faintly. Says the one who looks like she hasn't slept either. Alara sat beside him. For a while, neither spoke. The silence between them wasn't awkward anymore. It was full of unspoken gratitude and something neither of them could yet name. "I never thanked you," she finally said. "You don't need to," he replied. "It's my duty." "No," she said firmly, her voice shaking. "That wasn't duty. You didn't have to throw yourself in front of me. You could have ordered the guards to act. But you didn't. You saved me yourself." He looked away, staring at the ceiling. "Instinct," he said simply. Alara's eyes softened. "Then you have good instincts." Ryland exhaled, almost smiling. "You remind me of someone I once knew," he said quietly. "A doctor from one of my old missions. She used to say the same thing when I made reckless decisions. She didn't survive the last war." Alara's voice lowered. "I'm sorry," he nodded. "We all lose people. That's why I don't want another war." For a long time, Alara just watched him. His words carried the weight of sincerity. She could see it now. He wasn't the monster she had feared. He was a man who had lost too much but still chose to protect others. When she left the medical wing that night, she paused at the door and looked back. He had fallen asleep, his hand resting near the bandage, his face peaceful for the first time. As she walked down the silent corridor, she whispered to herself, "Maybe Father was right. Maybe this alliance isn't a curse." The stars of Aetheris shimmered through the palace windows like a sea of diamonds. Somewhere deep in her heart, something had begun to change. Something small, uncertain, but real. She didn't know what the future would bring. But she knew one thing with certainty. She no longer dreaded the human commander. And though neither of them realized it yet, the bond formed in that single act of sacrifice would soon become the force that would determine the fate of both their worlds. The skies over Aetheris were no longer calm. What began as a hopeful alliance had turned into a storm that threatened both worlds. News spread quickly across the galaxy. The Krell Dominion had broken through the defense lines along the outer systems and was advancing fast toward Aetheris. Every royal hall and military base was filled with the sound of alarms, hurried footsteps, and the heavy tension of fear. Commander Ryland Drake stood in the war chamber of the Aetherian palace, surrounded by holographic maps flickering with red light. His injured arm was still wrapped in a glowing brace, but he refused to rest. Around him stood the High King, his generals, and Alara, who had refused to leave his side since the attack. The room smelled of metal, ozone, and determination. "The Krell fleet will reach orbit within 2 days," one of the generals said gravely. "Their numbers are overwhelming. We cannot stop them with Aetherian forces alone." Ryland's eyes narrowed as he studied the map. "We won't need to," he said calmly. "If we strike first, before they expect us, we can cripple their command ship." The alien generals exchanged uncertain looks. "That would be suicide," one of them said. "Their capital ship is heavily shielded." Ryland turned to face them. "So is the will of a cornered world," he said. "They expect hesitation. That's how they win. But if we show them unity, human and Aetherian side by side, they'll retreat. They always do when they see strength." The king looked at him for a long moment, then nodded. "You have command, Commander Drake. The fleet will follow your lead." Alara felt her heart tighten. She had known this moment would come, but it still terrified her. She followed him as the meeting ended, her long gown flowing behind her like silver water. "You're planning to lead the attack yourself," she said quietly when they were alone. Ryland paused at the balcony overlooking the shining city. "Yes, I have to. Your injury hasn't healed," she said. "You can barely move your arm." He turned to her, his eyes steady. "It doesn't matter. My place is in the fight, and I won't ask others to risk their lives for peace if I'm not willing to do the same." Alara shook her head, her voice trembling. "You've already done enough. You've proved your loyalty, your courage. You don't need to keep throwing yourself into danger." He smiled faintly. "And you've proved your heart is stronger than most I've met. But I can't stop now, Ilara. The Krell won't stop unless someone makes them." She stepped closer, her voice breaking softly. "Then let me come with you." His expression changed, in part surprise, part admiration. "You?" "Yes," she said firmly. "I may not be a soldier, but I know strategy, communication, and I can rally our fleets. You said once that peace needs courage. Let me show it." For a moment, Ryland said nothing. Then he nodded slowly. "Very well. But you follow my orders on the field." A small smile touched her lips. "Only if they make sense." He almost laughed, and for a moment the weight of the coming battle lifted. They stood together as the twin suns began to set, the light painting the sky in gold and crimson, a promise and a warning all at once. 2 days later, the war began. The skies of Atheris turned dark as the Krell fleet descended. Their ships were black and jagged like shards of night tearing through the clouds. In response, the united human and Etherian fleet rose to meet them, silver against shadow, light against dark. From the command deck of the royal flagship, Ilara watched in awe as hundreds of vessels formed formation under Ryland's orders. His voice was calm over the comms. "All ships hold formation. Wait for my mark. Let them think we're afraid." The enemy opened fire first. Plasma beams cut through the void like spears of fire, shaking the ships. The Etherian shields held, glowing faintly under the impact. Ryland stood at the center of the command deck, his eyes locked on the holographic map. His tone remained steady, even as the room shook around him. "Now," he said. In an instant, the human squadrons broke formation, diving into the enemy lines with precision. The Etherian ships followed, their crystal cannons firing beams of blue light that tore through Krell armor. The battle turned chaotic, beautiful, and terrifying. Ilara worked beside Ryland, relaying commands and coordinating with the ground forces. Her calm voice carried strength across the network. "Sector 3, redirect energy to shields. Wing 5, cover the Royal Fleet's left flank." Ryland glanced at her, pride flickering in his eyes. "You were born for this," he said quietly. She smiled faintly. "Maybe I just needed the right reason." Hours passed like minutes. The Krell forces were stronger than anyone had expected, but the Alliance was holding. Just when victory seemed within reach, a warning sounded. The Krell command ship had activated its planet-crushing weapon, a massive energy core designed to wipe out cities from orbit. "They're targeting the capital," one officer shouted. Ryland looked at the map. "Then we end this now." He turned to Ilara. "You'll take command of the fleet. I'm leading a strike team to the enemy ship." Her eyes widened. "No, you can't go alone." "I won't be alone," he said. "I'll take the best pilots we have. But this is something I have to do myself. The weapon core has a manual trigger. Someone has to reach it." She grabbed his hand, her voice filled with fear. "If you go, you might not come back." He looked at her softly. "Then promise me one thing, that you'll keep what we built alive. This alliance, this hope. Promise me it won't die with me." Tears shimmered in her eyes. "I promise." Without another word, he turned and left, his figure disappearing into the flashing lights of the hangar. Ilara stood frozen, her chest heavy with dread. She wanted to stop him, but she knew she couldn't. His courage was the reason peace existed at all. The next hour felt like eternity. Through the communication screen, Ilara watched as Ryland's small strike craft weaved through enemy fire, diving toward the massive Krell ship. Explosions lit the dark sky like dying stars. His voice crackled over the comms. "I'm inside." Heading to the core, static. Then silence. Ilara's heart pounded painfully. She tried calling again, but there was no answer. Around her, officers worked frantically, the battle still raging. Then suddenly, the Krell flagship began to tremble. A massive explosion tore through its center, followed by a shockwave that lit the heavens with golden light. The weapon core had detonated from within. The enemy fleet faltered. One by one, their ships turned and retreated, vanishing into hyperspace. The skies of Atheris grew quiet once more, but Ilara could not celebrate. Her eyes were locked on the smoke and fire where Ryland's signal had disappeared. "Commander Drake, respond," she whispered into the communicator. "Please." Minutes later, a small, damaged escape pod emerged from the debris field. Cheers erupted across the command deck as it was recovered. Ilara ran to the docking bay herself, her heart racing. When the pod opened, Ryland stumbled out, covered in dust and burns but alive. He looked up, managing a tired smile. "Told you. I'd never let harm come to you." Alara didn't care who was watching. She rushed forward and threw her arms around him. He winced but didn't pull away. For a long moment, neither spoke. The war was over and both of them had survived. But they knew that what they had shared went beyond duty or alliance. In the following days, the palace was filled with celebration. The High King declared the victory as the birth of a new age, one where humans and Etherians would rule together in peace. Statues were built, songs written, and across the galaxy, people spoke of the union that had saved two civilizations. When the day of the royal wedding finally came, the Great Hall shone brighter than ever before. Ilara walked down the crystal steps dressed in white and silver, her heart calm and certain. Rylan stood at the altar, his uniform replaced with royal armor lined with the Etherian crest. There was no fear now, only respect, trust, and something deeper that neither could deny. As she reached him, she whispered softly, "I once begged my father not to choose you." He smiled gently. "And now?" She met his gaze. "Now I thank him every day that he did." When their hands joined, the crowd erupted in joy. The stars outside the palace seemed to shine brighter, as if the whole galaxy celebrated with them. That night, when the music faded and the halls grew quiet, Ilara stood with Rylan on the balcony where they had first spoken. The air was cool and the twin moons glowed softly above. He looked at her and said, "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if we had refused this alliance?" She smiled. "Then the stars might have never known peace, and I might have never known you." He reached out and took her hand. "Then I'd call it the best battle I ever fought." They stood there in silence, two souls from different worlds united not by command or duty, but by something greater. The shared belief that even across galaxies, hope can bloom where fear once ruled, and far beyond the skies of Atheris, the universe watched and remembered the story of the princess who once said, "Father, please not him," and the human warrior who taught her that courage and love could shine brighter than any war.